If you're here to learn about articulation maps in Cakewalk by Bandlab, then you are in the right place. Hi folks, I'm Mike, and I hope you're well. Articulation maps have arrived in Cakewalk by Bandlab, and if you use virtual instruments and you use articulations, your life is about to get a whole lot easier. In today's video, we're going to cover how they've improved things from the old ways of doing things, how to actually use articulation maps, and also how to create your own articulation maps to use across all of your projects. So let's get started with the old way of doing things. So here we are in Cakewalk, and I've got this virtual guitar part programmed here. You can see it in the track lane up here, and you can see its notes in the piano roll at the bottom there. I'll just open it up so you can see which one I'm using. I'm using this Ample Sound Martin guitar. Very nice sounding guitar, and it sounds like this in its regular state. Okay, now like many virtual instruments, it uses key switches to change its sounds, and you can see at the bottom of the piano keyboard here there's some notes which have these blue markers above. These indicate the key switches. So to get that regular sustained sound I was using there, I click on this one here. You can see the tooltips popping up there, and to say change it to a muted sound, I would click on this D note here. I'll just click on that with the mouse, and then now, by the way, I didn't have to use my mouse there. I could have played it on the keyboard. And then I can go back to the sustained note like this. Okay, and that's very typical of very many virtual instruments. You click a key on the, or press the key on the keyboard, and that will change the sound of the instrument. Now, sometimes you also get a combination of keys which need to be pressed, or one after the other, to change the sound. Now, on this particular instrument, we can change the playing position to further up the neck by, first of all, pressing this C-sharp key here to indicate a capo force, and then by clicking on one of these keys with the yellow heights above them to change the capo position. So I'll do that now. Let's have a listen. You can see it's being played further up the neck, or I could move it a bit further down the neck again. Okay, so don't get hooked up on the fact I'm using an Ample Sound guitar here. This is very typical for many virtual instruments. It's a way of being able to change the sound of that instrument on the fly while you're actually playing. So how does that translate to the actual sort of programming or the MIDI that we're going to be able to see down here? So here are the main sort of long notes that you can see here on the piano roll are the notes which are being played, okay, in this piece that I'm about to play you. Then if we scroll down here, you can see I've got these odd notes down here. These are the key switches, okay? These are the things which are changing the sounds of that guitar. And a little bit further up here, you can see these odd two here. This is where I use the combination of key switches to make that capo switch, okay? This is really important for later, so remember that combination thing happening as well as the regular key switches down here. So with this particular piece, what I had it doing was starting off in a certain capo position, then moving to another one, and also moving from sustained notes at the beginning to palm mute notes down here, just as a little demonstration of the kind of thing we would do. Let's just quickly play that so that you can see what's happening with it. I'll open up the guitar again. Let's have a listen. So that's the sort of basics of key switching, and that's how we've been doing it up until now in Cakewalk. Now, there are problems with this. The first problem that we have is really, it looks really messy, okay? It's sort of, you can't differentiate between actual notes being played and key switches with this view. The other thing is, you either have to use key switches an awful lot to remember which is on which note, or you kind of have to have a very good memory, or you're going to need to sort of have some reference available. It just gets a little bit difficult to use. Another problem we have is when we come to quantizing. Let's say some of these notes here, I'll just make sure my snap's off. Some of these notes are a little bit off the grid here, and I want to quantize them, okay? So I click up here, so I'm looking at my main track view. I select everything, and I click Q on the keyboard to quantize. I'll click on OK. Now, the notes have been quantized, but also the notes which are changing, or the ones that are being used as key switches, are also being quantized. That can be problematic at times. In fact, I'm going to undo that, because sometimes you need key switches to happen just a little bit before the next note is being played. You don't want them to be exactly on the grid. So That's another little problem. And the final problem that we really have with this is if we're using the staff view, and I'll open that up now with Alt-6. If you do use the staff view and you've used key switches in your music, then there is this problem that the key switches themselves are being put in as notes in the staff view. It looks really, really messy, and it doesn't represent what's actually going on in the music. So a few problems there. Luckily, they've been solved in this latest version of Cakewalk with the articulation features. Let's have a look at that now. So here we are looking at the same guitar part, but I've removed all of the notes which we were using as key switches to change the sound of the guitar. So we're just left with the basic notes, but we do want to change the sound of the guitar. So how do we do that now? Well, the keen-eyed amongst you will notice that now just above the piano roll here, there's this sort of gap there. And in the middle, you can see this text, double click or drag to add articulation. So this is where we add our articulation key switches. Now I want to have sustained notes right from the beginning up until around about this point here where I'm going to change to palm mutes, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drag it out from the beginning there up to that point where I want to change to palm mutes. I release, and that brings up this dialog box here. Now, when you first use articulations, you first have the version of Cakewalk with articulations, you'll have some existing ones, these chord triads here and these MIDI transforms here. Now, down here, you can see articulation maps in the project. I've already created an articulation map here to use in this project, and I'm going to demonstrate that to you now. Don't worry, because in the next section, I'm going to show you how to create your own articulation maps, okay? But for now, I created this one earlier. I'm going to click on that, and then we can see that we actually have two groups of articulations which I've created for this, and I'll explain the significance of that later. But I'm going to click on the first group here, which is called main articulations, or I called it main articulations. Then I'm going to click on sustain, okay? I'll click on sustain and then click on OK, and you can see that the sustain articulation is being shown here. Then at this point, I want to change it to palm mutes, okay? So I'm just going to drag out an area here. Now, when you do this, by default, it puts in the last articulation that you use. In that case, it was sustain. I need to change this to the palm mute articulation. So I'm going to right click on this and then go to reassign and then go over to where it says palm mute. Okay, this is one of the articulations I've programmed it in. Click on that and you can see visually there it's changed to palm mute. Now I want it to go back to sustain after that, and I'll drag that out for the whole of that next bar there, just like so. Again, I'll right click and reassign that to sustain. So now you can easily see in this articulations lane here that it goes from sustain notes to palm mutes back to sustain. Let's just have a listen so we can make sure that's happening. Wonderful. Okay. Right away, lots and lots of our problems have been solved. We can really easily see which articulations we're using there, okay? So we don't have to wonder when we look down on the piano roll what all of those extra notes are and what they're signifying. The other thing is if we select the whole part up here in the track lane and I go ahead and I'll quantize it. In fact, before I quantize it, let me turn snap off. I'll just drag this sustain articulation just out a little bit, okay? So it's just off of the grid. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'll click on Q to quantize. I'll click on OK. Now the notes down here were quantized, but you can see that the articulations were not quantized. And as I say, that's very, very important because for some virtual instruments, it's important that it's played just a little bit off of the grid. Okay, I'll just pop that back on the grid though by dragging it like so. Oops, undo that. Dragging it like so. Okay, and that's snapping there. Now, the other thing which has been solved is with the staff view. Okay, so I'll just open that up. And we can see here that the only notes that we can see are the notes being played on the guitar. We haven't got those key switches being shown anymore. So we've really solved all of our problems there. So the other thing that we were doing was changing the capo position. Now that required a combination of notes for one note to be pressed, if you remember, first of all, to indicate we're changing the capo position, and then another note to be pressed to indicate which position we're changing to. So let's do that now. Again, what I'm going to do actually is is just drag this area down, this new articulations area, and that will reveal that we can actually add another lane here. Now we want that to happen at the same time that we're choosing our sustain articulation there. So I'm just going to, again, just drag out on this second lane here. I'm only going to do this for the first little bit here. I'm going to change to capo position 4. So I'll click on my ample guitar Martin project, the one that's being used in the project there. I'm going to go to my capo force group of articulations. I'll click on that, and I'm going to go to capo force 2. Now you'll notice it's just one thing that I'm choosing here, even though there was a combination of notes which needed to be used. I'm going to show you how to create that later, so don't worry when I get on to showing you how you can create and edit your own maps. So I'll click on OK, and that piano force one is being put in there. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on my display so I can see which ones are being used there. And then I'll use another capo force here. Capo, which one is it? Who knows? I'll right click there, and I'm just going to reassign that to capo force 6, okay? So we're not only changing from sustain to palm mutes there, but also changing the position of the capo there, okay? So let's, capo, I keep switching. Let's have a listen. I'll put the guitar up now. Okay, so you should have seen that at the beginning, changing from those two positions. So that's very, very handy indeed. It makes it really straightforward to do those different things. Now, why have we got two different groups here and we've got two different lanes? This becomes significant, and it's important that you understand this. This is useful when you know that you're going to use different articulations at the same time. Now, once articulations are assigned to a particular group, for example, the palm mute is assigned, as you can remember, to the first group, which was main articulations. It can't be used on this second lane here. So if I then try and insert it, I'll drag out an area, I'll reassign that to the main articulations. I'll try and do a palm mute here. I'll click on that. You'll notice that just pops up there into that first lane. So we cannot use, more than one group of articulations on each lane. That's the main rule that you need to remember. And when you're going ahead and creating your own articulations, that could be important to you in determining what groups you're going to create and what things are going to be in those groups. So let's take a look at how we create our own articulation maps now. By the way, are you finding this video useful so far? Perhaps you've learned something you didn't already know. If so, could you go ahead, show your appreciation and hit the like button for me? It really does help me out. And if you really like this kind of content, especially about Cakewalk, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube so that you get notified about my other videos. Now, back to this video. So naturally, you're going to want to create your own articulation maps. You're going to want to use them in the project, and you're going to want to reuse them in other projects so you don't have to create them every time for each virtual instrument. I'm going to show you how to do all of that in this section. Now, before we do embark upon that, I just want to give you a quick tip. I recommend that you either have the documentation available for the virtual instrument you're using, if it documents where all the articulations are on things like the key switches, or you make your own notes. Now, I've done that. I've just got a little notepad off screen here. I'll just drag it on so you can see it. And I've just made a note here of where each of the articulations happens, which note I need to press to get those happening, okay? Very, very handy, because you kind of have to switch in and out all of the time of the interface that I'm about to show you if you don't do that. So definitely have that available. Okay, so I'm going to create an articulation map for this guitar again. And I'm just going to double click in this articulation area up here just above the piano roll there. So I'll just double click on there. That brings up this window here. We've got those two articulation maps available that come by default with Cakewalk with this version. We're not going to be using those. We want to create our own. So we'll just go down to the bottom left and click on edit there. That brings up this edit screen. Now, again, it's a sort of a similar screen to what we've just seen, but we actually need to click again on this plus button right down here to create a new articulation map for this project. Okay, so we'll click on that. That creates a new map with that default name, and it also creates the first group, because you always need at least one group in your map. So I'll just quickly double click on that to rename it. We'll call it guitar so I don't have to type too much, and then we'll double click on the name up here and we'll call it main, or just call it main. I don't like typing. Okay. And so we've renamed that. We're ready to go. Let's create our first key switch articulation here. So all I need to do in this box down here is click to add from MIDI. Okay. So I'm going to click on that. Now it's waiting for me to press a key on my keyboard. I'm going to go ahead and do that. This is this C right down the bottom. So I'll click on that and you'll see that this articulation has appeared automatically. So it's basically like a MIDI learn kind of function. Now I'm just going to rename that. I'll again double click on there, and that is for the sustain articulation. Okay, it's got a default color. You can change all of that thing, of course. You can change the default duration. I'm not going to bother with any of that. Now you can see over here that it's got some other information. It's got information, for example, for what note was pressed. I'm not going to go into all the details of this, but you know, the play at is going to become important a little bit later on. I'll explain that a little bit later on. But essentially, it's got the note assigned to that. We can, of course, edit from here, all of that good stuff. So we've set up our first articulation. I'll do another one here. Again, I'll just click on add from MIDI. Now it's important to note here, it's waiting for something here. It doesn't have to be a key press. I could use a controller on my keyboard, a pitch bend modulation wheel. Any of those things can also be used. That's important because some virtual instruments don't only use key presses for articulation. So just so you know, you can change articulations with all kinds of MIDI controls. So I'm going to do the palm mute articulation. That happens on the D key, so I'll press that now. You can see that's appeared there, and again I'll just call it palm mute. Okay, so just click on OK there, just to close this window, and then again I'll just go ahead, click on that to choose which articulation I'm going to start off with. It's in the main one. I'll start off with a sustain, click on OK, and let's put that sustain one in there. I'll just drag that back over there. That's where we had our sustain up until there, and then we could have our mute in there as well. Okay, right click, reassign, palm mute. Okay, so that's how easy it is to create your own maps. Now, if you remember before, I also had those capo or capo changes which required a combination of keys. So let's take a quick look at that now. Again, I'm just going to drag this down a little bit, and I'm just going to click on here. I'll do it in the place where I'll actually do the change, so I'll just drag it out there. That brings up this. I'll go to the guitar articulation map again, but of course I want to edit it because I want to create a new group, so I'll just edit it. I'll go up to where the articulation groups are. I'll click on add, change the name of it just call it capo. I know I'm going to get grief in the comments for my pronunciation of this. You can say it both ways, okay, depending on what part of the world. So the next thing I want to do is create those combinations. So I'm going to just do add from MIDI again. I'm going to press the first key of the combination, which was this C sharp up here. So I'll just click on that. So that is, we'll just rename it. We'll just call it capo 1. That's fine. Now, if you remember what had to happen with this one, I pressed that key and then I had to press another key afterwards to indicate which capo position I was changing to. So I'm going to go do that now. I'll just do one of the sort of random ones. And over here, you can see we've got the first note here. That was added in already. I'm going to add another note in. So add from MIDI. Now, and I'll press one of the notes which sets the capo position. You heard that happen on the instrument momentarily there. So this one now has got 2 keys involved. Now, you can change various things about these. You can have one of them, just play right at the start of the area you've marked out for the articulation. You can have one of them play at the end of that. Or as by default, it's on duration, I believe. So that means they play for the duration. Now, I believe, even though I don't know for sure, that in actual fact, although these appear to be happening at the same time, in terms of MIDI events, one will happen after the other. And that's very handy in this case because with this particular instrument, we want that second one to happen just after the first one, okay? But, you could change when it happens again by changing these play at things. So that's how we add those sort of more complex ones. So I'll just click on OK there. And again, I'll select that, click on it here, click on OK, and you can see that's been put in there. So that's how you create those different articulations. As I say, it doesn't have to be just key presses. It could be using controls on your MIDI controller, whatever you've got available to you. Now, the other thing you'll want to do is probably go ahead and use this in another project. So I'll just open that area there again. You can see here that I've got my guitar articulation map there. I'll just click on edit again. Now what I can actually do when I'm in here is export this. So this exports to a new file format, and if we click on that now, you'll see that the default sort of place it's gone to in my case is on the C drive, Cakewalk content, Cakewalk core, articulation maps. Now if I save it to that specific place, which I'll do now, what would I call it? I'd call it guitar. And that's saved that one there. Now, nothing's happened as you can see, but if you do save it in that particular place, then what will happen when you restart Cakewalk, because it's in that particular folder, it's going to appear there, and you can use it on any other project after that. So whenever you use that virtual instrument. Now, it may be that somebody sent you one, etc., something like that. Then you can just click on the import button and obviously import that file wherever you've got that saved on your computer. So very, very handy. It means that you guys will be able to share articulation maps with each other, which I think is a very, very handy thing to do to save us all a lot of bother, especially for the more popular instruments which get used. And you can also, of course, as I say, make sure that those new maps are available to any project and not just the one you're currently working in. So I happen to think that Bandlab have done a great job, especially considering this is the first implementation of this feature. Now, I found it fairly straightforward to use, but you may have found some of it a little bit confusing. If so, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments down below, and I'll try my very best to help you out. Now, also let me know in the comments down below which virtual instrument you think you'll be creating new maps for. I'm really interested to hear what are the most popular ones out there, and perhaps we can start sharing maps with each other as well. Now, if you did enjoy this video and you found it useful, can you do me a favor and go ahead and hit the like button for me? That's the best way that you can thank me. Well, apart from thanking me, but do both. If you do like this kind of content, of course, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube so that you're notified about my future videos. And if you'd really like to help the channel out and show your appreciation, then you can become a patron. Just follow my link in the description down below to my Patreon page, and for as little as $1 per month, you can help me help you by keep making these kinds of videos. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video.